When you imagine a better world, what do you see? At the end of the day, what matters most to you? Whatever that is, fossil fuels are probably not at the top of your list. The world has known this for over 3 decades. Burning fossil fuels leads to more severe climate change, impacting the most vulnerable first. This is how much global temperature has gone up since we discovered fossil fuels. For many years, scientists told us that we should stay under this line, but that we would still be okay as long as we didn't go beyond this one. In 2018, the world's top scientists gave us a stark warning. It turns out we're not safe in this zone after all. And if temperatures rise beyond 2 degrees, we're headed for more intense heat waves, wildfires, droughts, and mass migrations. The world only has a small carbon budget left before surpassing that line. It means that for a 66% chance to stay below a 2-degree increase in temperature, the world needs to completely decarbonize the economy in about a decade. 2 proposals lay out a plan of how we might achieve this: the Green New Deal in the US and the European Green Deal in Europe. The good news, they're feasible, at least on paper. The sobering news, whether our politicians seriously try to tackle the climate crisis while protecting those suffering its consequences today, that will show in the next few months alone. It heavily depends on what happens to these proposals in the US and the European Union, and your voice can influence the future of these green deals significantly. At heart, both proposals share a message. The climate crisis is also a social crisis. The factors that are destroying the planet are the same that are harming people. For example, wealth inequality makes it harder for low-income families to get back on their feet when they've been hit by a climate change-induced hurricane. Therefore, solving the climate crisis needs to address these social issues too: racism and wealth and gender inequality. It needs to be intersectional. Both Green Deals agree that in order to do this, we have to restructure our economies, transition them away from fossil fuels by 2030, while investing into green jobs, green infrastructures, a robust welfare system, and regenerative agriculture. Because of the economic and political influence of both the US and the European Union, the success or failure of their Green Deals could tip the scales when it comes to not surpassing a 1.5-degree temperature rise. We can't let this chance slip away. So how can you and I help make it happen? In the US, the Green New Deal was never a detailed policy proposal. It was never a bill. The idea started with just a 14-page document drafted by a think tank called New Consensus, which was mostly thought of as a vision, a North Star of where the country needs to head towards to build a system that protects nature, people, and wildlife. The idea was then picked up by activist groups like the Sunrise Movement, or public figures such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, propelling it into politics and public discourse. A non-binding proposal of the Green New Deal was rejected in the Senate in 2019, but that doesn't mean that the discussion is over yet. Assuming a peaceful transition of power to Joe Biden, the chances of decarbonizing the American economy are more tangible than ever before. But you shouldn't let your guard down. Biden has been clear about how he doesn't agree with the entirety of the Green New Deal proposal, nor does he have a majority in the Senate, which will make it very difficult for him to push an ambitious climate agenda. Most of the levers now to keep the Green New Deal alive will be at state and local level. Here's how you can help. Call your state representatives to let them know that you support the Green New Deal. Calling members of Congress is a powerful way to have your voice heard. Calls are tallied by staffers, and the count is given to your representatives. This paints for them a good picture of how strongly their constituents feel about a current issue. The sooner you reach out, the more likely it is that your voice will influence their voting position. If you have the means, donate to grassroots groups like the Sunrise Movement or the Sierra Club, who support the Green New Deal and have a track record of protecting the environment at local levels in the past years. Don't let the federal government off the hook either. The Biden and Harris campaign promised to spend $2 trillion over 4 years to convert the US to clean energy. Hold them accountable. Have a look at 350.org, who has put a list together of the most pressing policies and executive orders that the Biden government should push through in its first 100 days to draw down fossil fuel emissions. The European Green Deal has already been converted into a package of concrete measures. This is mostly thanks to the incredible awareness campaign run by Fridays for Future, which pushed the European Union to finally do something about climate change. Now those measures in the European Green Deal are being translated into so-called climate law. The climate law is the key process that you and I should be watching very closely in the upcoming weeks and months. This climate law will determine how much all 27 members of the European Union have to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. All other European law will have to align with that reduction target. So it is very important that this climate law is ambitious. Unfortunately, the EU is already finding loopholes to avoid significant commitments. In theory, the EU has agreed to reduce carbon emissions by at least 55% until 2030 in comparison to levels in 1990, the minimum scientists are urging for. However, if one looks closer at what is not being accounted for in that emission target, one realizes that the number itself is a bluff. One such loophole, for example, is that the EU wants to exclude international emissions from its carbon budget. So if I, as an EU citizen, buy shoes produced in Bangladesh, the responsibility for the emissions caused to produce and ship those shoes is placed on that country, Bangladesh in this case. This violates the principle of climate justice and hides the actual carbon footprint of rich economies. This means that with the current reduction target of 42%, the chances of staying under 1.5 degrees are very slim, less than half. We need to stop the climate law from being watered down. This is how we can create pressure. The EU does not have the power to force national governments to do whatever it decides. The member states of the EU also sit at the negotiation table and have a say in how ambitious the emissions reduction target should be. If Angela Merkel, Pedro Sánchez or Emmanuel Macron, for example, don't agree with an ambitious reduction target, that number simply will not be on the negotiating table. If you're a citizen of the EU, the single most important thing you can do is to call out your government. Let them know that they cannot count on your future vote if they don't sign a climate law that sets the EU's 2030 climate target at an actual 66% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. You can also sign and share this petition. It calls for Frans Timmermans to respect those targets too. He is the Vice President of the EU Commission and is leading the negotiations for the climate law. The world stands at a crossroads. Initiatives like the Green Deals in Europe or the US are now the key to change the course of the climate crisis. World leaders are procrastinating, not because the Green Deals are not feasible, but because they don't have the courage or the will to face the fossil fuel industry. The corona crisis has unmasked the hypocrisy of even questioning whether we can finance necessary fast transformations of how our societies work. When you imagine a better world, what do you see? What will you do?